The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls, greetings. Welcome to another presentation in this public service nation-building series, The Law and You. This is program number 884, coming to you on Monday the 13th of November 2017. On this program, I will speak to you on the topic, some common pitfalls in buying property. But before getting into the topic, a few short preliminary comments. Firstly, as usual, condolences go out to all families which have suffered recent bereavements. And in that connection, let me send special sympathies to Brother Bailey, who has lost his wife, Kenlyn. Her mother was a good friend of mine when we lived just a few feet away from her residence at Old Montrose. She'd be laid to rest on Wednesday, and I look forward to attending the funeral service. Stay up, my brother Renrick. Secondly, I have been requested by the female members of my household, namely my wife, Bishop Juliet Campbell, my daughters, Arusha Campbell, Dr. Arusha Campbell, and Mandela Campbell, to say thank you for all those persons who attended the Arise and Blossom event on Saturday afternoon at the Methodist Church Hall. And they want to thank all who assisted in the sponsoring, organizing, and they want you to look forward to the next Arise and Blossom event. Then I would like to notify you that the Roman Catholic Bishop of Kingstown, Bishop County, has taken the initiative to organize a month of special prayers in churches. And this Friday coming, the 15th of November, there will be a very special service at the Co-Cathedral of the Assumption in Kingstown, beginning at 5, followed by a candlelight procession through the streets of Kingstown. All religious denominations are invited to attend. This is in direct response to the recent spate of violent crimes we have had in the country. And as you know, many churches have resorted to say special prayers. So I thank the bishop for this initiative, and he is extending the invitation to all churches this Friday afternoon, the 15th of November, beginning with a service at the Co-Cathedral of the Assumption at 5 o'clock, and then a candlelight procession. You are requested to wear white or white and black, but white is the predominant color for that event. And finally, for preliminaries, it gives me tremendous pleasure to congratulate the Reverend Victor H. Job on the publication of his hopefully first book called Memoirs of a Methodist Minister. The book is some 312 pages long, full of details of the theological journey of Reverend Job. I have read the entire book, and I can tell you that you will enjoy reading it. Reverend Job has come from very humble origins, and his last national designation was that of Governor General's deputy. And fittingly, the very last page of the book is devoted to a reproduction of the letter of appointment by which Reverend Job was made Governor General's deputy on the 18th of September 2015. This is a tremendous book, and I will say a few more words about it next week, DV. The launching is taking place next week, Thursday, the 23rd of November, at the Methodist Church Hall, beginning at 6 p.m. So keep that in mind, and on next week's program, Divi, I will remind you. Memoirs of a Methodist Minister, a fantastic autobiography. Thank you, Reverend Victor H. Job, and for those who want to know what the H is for, they will find that out when they come to the launching, won't they? Okay. So now I get into the topic for the evening, some common pitfalls which are encountered in land purchases, common pitfalls in buying property, excuse me. For most people, the largest expenditure you will make in your life would be the expenditure involved in acquiring a home. Of course, for some business people, they might deal in larger sums, but for the average person, the biggest set of money you will spend is on acquiring a shelter. Now, if you are embarking on that venture of buying, whether it is a parcel of land or house and land, unless you have legal training, don't dream of doing it without legal advice, please. You must seek the services of a lawyer when you are contemplating buying property. And you all understand by property I mean real property, because everything is property that is tangible. But for the purposes of this discussion, I mean land or house and land. Now, the reason I have given you that bit of advice, which I have given you before, but you know, some people want to learn the hard way, is that the buying of property can involve a lot of legal technicalities. And unless you have legal training, you may not be aware of some of these technicalities. Now, in the Commonwealth Caribbean, there are 3 different types of conveyancing, and conveyancing is the process by which property is bought, sold, leased, alienated. So in the Commonwealth Caribbean, we have three systems. There is the Roman Dutch system, which is still largely in force in Guyana. Secondly, there is the civil law system, which is largely in force in St. Lucia. And in the rest of the OECS, we have conveyancing based on English common law principles. But even those common law principles are subdivided into two categories: conveyancing by registration of title and conveyancing by deed. St. Vincent and the Grenadines happens to be one of the few CARICOM countries that still has the old-fashioned conveyancing by deed. We do not have conveyancing by registration of title. Almost all the other CARICOM countries have conveyancing by registration. Whether you go to Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad, Dominica, Antigua. But in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we still have the ancient, old-fashioned, and in many respects more complicated system of conveyancing by title deed. You see, in the other countries of CARICOM, what we use as a deed, what we call a deed, what we prepare as a deed, they call it a certificate of title. And that certificate of title could be a document of 1 or 2 pages. But in our case in St. Vincent and Grenadines, as you know, a deed stretches many pages, and it's a document that practically has no punctuation. The time will come, hopefully, when we will graduate to the system of registration by title. For that, we have to go through a lot of expenses, and there will be some initial inconvenience because that depends on preparing a cadastral survey of the entire islands of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, where each parcel of land can be identified by a number. And when land is subdivided, then a new title is prepared. Usually, and increasingly nowadays, that is computerized. But we haven't got there yet. So that in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, in order for a lawyer to guarantee to a client that the title to a particular piece of property is sound, that lawyer has to carry out physical searches at the land registry. He has to carry out physical searches at the High Court registry, going through the judgment books. Whereas in those other countries which have registration by title, certifying title to land can take just a few minutes. In our case, it can take weeks of physical searching at the registry, going through the records, because our system depends on the registration of title deeds at the land registry. Now, people who are interested in selling land or selling property to other people have to learn to be patient, because the proposed purchaser has to go and get a lawyer to carry out a search or searches to make sure that the title of the person who is proposing to sell the property is sound. And let me tell you this, if somebody is proposing to sell you a parcel of land and they tell you, look, make a down payment to me, and you could always go to the lawyer afterwards and so on, but give me a down payment. Don't. You should never, ever part with money as a down payment on property unless a lawyer advises you that it is safe and sound to do so. And anyone who is hurrying you up for a down payment and telling you, don't bother with the lawyer, everything is all right, look, here's my title deed, everything is fine. Pinch yourself. Because the process takes time in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Now, land has several characteristics. But the most important characteristic of land for these discussion purposes is that it cannot be moved. You can't take a piece of land from Cane Garden and carry it to Riley. Now, over time, land can be eroded. Land can be damaged. You may have a tropical system where there's a mudslide or landslide, and acres of land can simply be washed down a hillside and practically disappear. So to that extent, land can be destroyed. The configuration of the land can be changed by natural forces. But generally speaking, if you have a lot of land in Chumuka, that is where that lot of land will remain until the Lord puts in his appearance. And that is why in some civil law systems in Europe, the big division in property is not real property and personal property as in the English system. The division is between movables and immovables. Movables refer to what we in the English-speaking system would call personal property. That is, anything can be changed, can be moved from one place to another. And in their system, they refer to land and interest in land as immovable property. Same concept as in England, which we have inherited in these parts, but different terminology. So that the ownership of a parcel of land is to be determined by a piece of paper or pieces of paper recording the various interests of the person who is called the owner. The fact that somebody has a title deed for a parcel of land does not necessarily mean they are free to sell the land. They may have a title deed with their name on it in reference to a particular parcel of land. But somebody whose name is not on the title deed may have a share in that land, which the title deed cannot disclose by itself. The most common situation in our system is where a man and a woman live together unmarried, and one of them either inherits property or they purchase property together, and they purchase it just in the name of one of them. Now, if two people are living together as man and wife, and one of them inherits a parcel of land from a relative who has died, that parcel of land remains the property of the person who inherited it. But if the other party to the union who has not inherited that property makes a significant financial contribution towards putting a house on that land with the intention that that house would belong to both of them as if they were man and wife, then that person who has put in money to build a house on the other person's land acquires an interest in the land, though there is nothing written as yet, by virtue of what is called one of the principles of equity. So let me make it clearer by using names, and let me use two common names. Tom and Mary. Let us say Tom and Mary decide to live together. So they come together, start to have a family. Mary inherits a parcel of land from her father. Then Tom gets some money and uses that money to construct a dwelling house on Mary's land, Mary in inverted commas. So they live in the house as man and wife. The land is Mary's land by inheritance. It is a wall house, so it forms part of the land. But because Tom has invested a substantial amount of his own money in putting a house on the land, he gets an interest in the property, the house and land. Now, suppose they fall out. And then they started living apart. Mary has a title deed in her name which she got from her father. And she is living there in the house that was built substantially by John's resources. Mary decides, okay, at some future time she wants to sell what she calls her property. So she arranges with somebody and says, look, I'm going to sell you my property. Now that person ought to have gone to a lawyer and put the case to the lawyer. The lawyer would then carry out investigations and would discover that it is not Mary who built the house, but it was built by her ex-common-law husband, Tom. So the lawyer would say to his client, sorry, you can't buy that property from Mary, you know, because even if she signs a deed for you, Tom could come and challenge that deed on grounds that he has a share in that property, even though Mary's name alone is on the title deed. Take the case of husbands and wives. Very often you will find that the title deed to land, which belongs to a married couple, is in the name of the man. Nowadays, I have been advising women, and I'm sure many of them have been taking the advice. If you are even married to a man and property is to be acquired by both of you, make sure your name is on the title deed as well. Because if the marriage ends in divorce, having your name on the title deed would be evidence that you have an interest in the property. But there are cases where the man's name alone is on the title deed. And then if problems arise in the marriage, the lady has horrors, because the man would try to say, this is my property, you ain't have anything here, you never used to work, all you did, you look after the children and brought them up and so on. I am the one who went out and did the hard work and got the money to build and so on and so on. Well, the judges have decided long ago, and more so now, that the contribution a wife makes as a mother would usually entitle her to claim a share in property, even though she didn't put any physical money into the property. Because the judges have realized that the wife's contribution towards the household is just as important and noteworthy as the breadwinner's contribution, that is, a man who went out and worked and brought home his wages or took it to a bank. So that there may be persons who are entitled to a share in property, which the law calls an interest in property, even though their name is not on any document to say so. But if they are able to establish by evidence in a court of law and by the principles of law which are set out either in legislation or in judicial decisions, then the court would rule that in equity they are entitled to a share in the property. Now, I would wish to continue this topic next week, Devi, because there are a few other aspects of the pitfalls that I want to bring to your attention. But I hope I have said enough to let you know that the question of buying property without getting legal advice or making a down payment on property without getting legal advice is a serious question, and if you are thinking of doing that, please don't get legal advice. Let the lawyer check it out, because when the lawyer signs the back of a title deed, he is signing to say the title of the person who is acquiring that property is now sound, because it is based on a sound title from the person from whom the property was acquired. As I said before, investing in property is going to be one of the biggest investments most people make in their life. It's nothing to fool around with. You have to know what you're doing, and since you may not be a lawyer, you pay a lawyer to tell you what is what. And don't think that legal fees could be avoided and that you and your friend could work out something, because after all, it's your friend or your cousin and he wouldn't do anything to cheat you. He may not consciously be trying to cheat you, but he may just be unaware that he is not the only person with an interest in the property that he has arranged to sell to you. Okay? All right, well, that is all from this program of The Law and You, program number 884. I look forward to being a further service to you next week, Monday, DB, for another presentation in this nation-building public service program, The Law and You. Do have a pleasant week, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Don't forget the ecumenical service this Friday and the procession starting at the Roman Catholic Church in Kingstown. Until then, may the good Lord continue to bless us all.
The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.